Hi, if you like the video, please remember to subscribe. Hi everybody, and today I'd like to introduce you to my Zorki 4K 35mm film rangefinder. This is a little camera that I wanted for a long time, and I finally managed to pick up this example. I think it was last year at the car boot, maybe the year before, for about £20. I was really lucky to pick it up. Sometimes people refer to the Zorkis and the Zorki 4s and the Zorki 4Ks as kind of the Russian Leica, because the design, well, the start of the design was based on, I think it's the Leica 2, the pre-war Leicas, and then the Russians kind of took that design and kind of developed it themselves. But the cameras kind of look very similar. They have a lot of similar features, and apart from the price, and it's a rangefinder, which is an interesting way of shooting if you haven't used a rangefinder before. But although people call them like Leica copies and stuff, they don't really. They have a character and a feel and a look all of their own as well. And if you can pick up one that works, you'll have a lot of fun shooting with it, because, as I say, it's quite different from SLRs or compacts, and especially your DSLR. So what I'm going to try and do in this guide is introduce you to the Zorki 4K, give you some ideas on why they're so good, and why you might want to consider shooting with one, a little bit of history about the camera, where you might want to look for them if you want to buy one, what to look for when you buy one, how to use the camera itself, what films you might want to try and use it, some other lenses you might want to consider, and a little bit of advice on flash photography. And I'll probably end up with some ideas on where maybe you could start to explore next with the camera, sort of different techniques and different things that you could do. Before we start though, there's a really important thing you've got to remember about the Zorkis, especially the 4s, 4Ks as well. When you're playing around with it, say you're picking it up in a shop, or you're playing around when you bought one at home, never ever change the shutter speed without first winding the camera on. That's the golden rule. Never change the shutter speed unless the shutter is cocked. And if it's a Zorki 4, instead of having a lever, you've got a sort of knurled knob that you've got to change. So why is the 4K so good? Well, it's a 35mm film, fully mechanical clockwork rangefinder camera. They're very cheap. They take great photos. The lenses are really nice and sharp. And it's also a little bit of a history from the Cold War, because these were made in the Soviet Union, in Russia, in a communist factory in the 1970s. Now, what's different about rangefinders, because you're probably looking at this and saying, wait a minute, it looks a little bit like a bigger version of the Trip 35 behind my right shoulder. But what you do with a rangefinder, it focuses differently. Well, you still have to turn the lens to focus it, but to achieve focus, instead of having to rely on you being able to decide whether something's in or out of focus or on a little blurred bit in the middle of the screen, what it actually does is you've got two windows on the front, your main viewfinder and your little one. And then as the light comes through, it's kind of projecting those two pictures in front of you as you look through the viewfinder. And as you focus, there's like a yellow, smaller image that becomes superimposed. And you know when it's in focus because those two pictures are covering each other. So you can look at the edges, and if they're sharp, you know that it's in focus. So that means you can focus with a rangefinder, even if you've got quite bad eyesight, because you're not relying on your eye's ability to focus. It's just the ability for you to be able to see the difference between, say it was a lamppost. So in the viewfinder, what you would see is, if it was out of focus, you'd kind of see the main lamppost, and you'd see like this light yellow image. And then as you turn the focus ring, as you go into focus, they would come together, and then you're in focus. So some people think it's a really quick way of focusing as well. Myself, I'm not particularly sure, but I'm sure once you get used to it, it's very good that way. But you don't have to focus like that, remember. You can just use distance focusing, zone focusing, or you could just, stick it on F8, set it to almost infinity, and you'd be there. Now, being a fully manual camera, you've got to put all the settings in, the aperture and the shutter speed to get okay exposure. But don't worry about it. It's quite a simple thing to do, and it's another way that you can learn more about your photography. With our digital cameras, even when we're shooting in aperture priority mode and shutter priority mode, we're leaving a lot of thought to the camera. And when you do try a mechanical clockwork film camera like one of these, when you've got to think about all the other stuff, although at first it might seem a little daunting, when you get used to it, it kind of really enables you to understand the exposure triangle and the relationship between the ISO, or the sensitivity of your film, the shutter speed of your camera, and the aperture, or the hole in the front of the lens. And when you go back to your digital camera, you'll have a better understanding of it. And also, the great thing about film is, because you've got to pay for each frame, haven't you? Basically, you've got to buy the film, you've got to pay for developing. It does slow you down quite a lot. And that when you take that back to your digital photography, it stops you burning through so many frames. You know, you tend to get your hit rate, your keep rate goes up a little bit more, because you spend more time looking around the frame, looking at the composition, deciding if it's worth taking the photograph as well in the first place. There's no battery on the 4K, so it's always ready to shoot. All you need to do is put some fresh film in it and go out that way. So there's no battery compartment to gum up. You know, as long as mechanically it stays sound, you're going to be able to shoot with it for many years if you look after it and you don't drop it, and barring, you know, major mechanical failure, because these are really old cameras now, which is really exciting, because obviously lots of recent digital cameras and later film cameras that rely on lots of electronics, you know, one, the batteries are quite expensive to buy, so that kind of puts you off, and also the battery compartments get bunged up when the batteries leak, and you know, they fail more. So as long as you're not too rough with your 4K and you don't change the shutter speed without winding it on first, your Zorki camera, you know, could last you for years and years, and it will probably last you way longer than any digital camera, which will be, you know, obsolete in a handful of years too. Okay, a little bit of history about the Zorki 4Ks. They were made in the Russian factory, the KMZ or KMZ factory, from 1972 to 1978 in Krasnogorsk. Hope I said that right. Which is a western suburb of Moscow. And KMZ have been making cameras since about 1946, after the Second World War. And they kind of started off with making Fed cameras, and then Zorkis, and also the Zenit SLRs as well, which you'd probably be familiar with if you peruse sort of second-hand camera shops or car boot sales or thrift shops. They tend to come up quite often because Russia kind of exported quite a few of them, and they were quite cheap compared to some of their Canon, Pentax, Olympus equivalents at the time. Now, the Zorki 4K was mainly made for the export market, and KMZ made over 500,000 4Ks. And I don't know, I guess you could say it's probably the pinnacle of their evolution of the rangefinder, because it was their last one that they did. And as I said, originally it was inspired by the pre-war Leicas. But again, don't think of the Zorki 4K as a Leica clone, because, as I said before, they kind of have a look and a feel and aesthetic all of their own. And, you know, for less than the price of a Leica strap, you can have a really classy 35mm camera that will take great photos and teach you so much about photography. I guess I have to say that getting quality second-hand cameras at car boot sales in the UK, thrift stores and charity shops, is it's definitely getting harder. I don't see the same amount of cameras I used to a few years ago, because, I don't know, maybe supply's starting to run out. You know, people have cleared their lofts and their cupboards, but it really is a numbers game. If you go to enough thrift stores, if you go to enough charity shops, if you go to enough garage sales, if you go to enough car boot sales, you know, you will pick up these bargains. But, you know, you've got to get, especially in the UK, if you're going to car boot sales, you've got to get there early, and you've got to know what you're looking for as well. And I guess there's more bargain hunters out there than ever, and there seems to be an awful lot of people, especially when you go to second-hand stores, not necessarily charity shops, second-hand stores, where people think because they've got a film camera and it might look a little bit unusual that it's worth a lot of money. But, you know, they're not, because one of the guides, if you like, to price is places like eBay, in the UK, Gumtree, or I guess in America, places like Craigslist. But also, don't forget about your relatives and friends. Give them a ring. Phone round old relatives, cousins. Now, has anybody got any old 35mm film cameras? Or, well, film cameras in general. You might hit the mother load and someone's got like a medium format or a large format camera. But you never know, you might come across somebody who's got, like, especially if they're a photography enthusiast, something like an old Zorki Ford 4K. And I get, you know, how much are they worth? Well, I don't know. It's how much you're willing to spend. Personally, I was willing to spend 20 to 30 UK pounds on a camera at a car boot sale that I know a little bit about. You know, it looked clean and stuff like that. But normally my limit at car boot sales is about a tenner, unless it's something very special. But you've got to decide what you would pay on eBay or Gumtree or Setter. So why don't we have a quick look at eBay, just see what's out there, just to give you an idea of the price as of January 2015. So this is eBay UK, and let's go to ending soonest and see what's out there. And one of the things you've also got to decide is whether you want to get one from someone who's selling within your country or one that's sort of importing it. So let's have a look. What we got? You always want to buy one with a lens. Don't just get a body, because the lenses can be the more expensive part. So let's have a look at this one. Zorki 4K rangefinder with 50mm lens. Does it work? Let's go and have a look. I've had the camera for about 20 years. I've never used it myself, but it was given me as working. I found point and shoots better. The lens has a small flat on the rim. See picture. Alright, so it's been dropped. The leather case strap is snapped. You could repair. It may need some TLC. I've tried to scrub the camera. This is an old camera from you, so it kind of sold as seen. What's he going for? Well, a bit of a tenner with a day left. So I don't know. That would be a bit of a gamble, wouldn't it? So let's go down. So what we got here? Zorki 4K rangefinder. Buy it now of £42. Well, this might be interesting. So we've got the camera and the case. Now remember, with the Zorki 4Ks, there is no lug on the side, so you really need the case if you want to carry it around. What do they say? This was in the loft of one of my old dad's boxes. It appears to be working, but I haven't got any film to send. This also comes with another case. Feel free to message me. Okay, so again, they haven't used the camera. They don't know whether it works. Let's go down to this one. 4 days left. Immaculate condition. Let's click on this one. So this one says Zorki original case, immaculate condition. Yep, they don't say whether it works or not though. Excellent inbox. Let's have a look at this one. £50. Buy it now. So there's a good description, lots of nice pictures. Condition. All the features have been tested by professional repairmen and work properly. Camera is in excellent condition. Glass on lens is clean, no fungus. All shutter speed look appropriate. Viewfinder is clean, diaphragm okay. Focusing and stopping smooth. Self-timer works. Coming with the original case, camera is easy to operate. There you go. So this one's probably coming from another country, is it? You can buy one for £50. That's not bad, is it? What's their feedback? 99.6. So there we go. So £50 will get you a Zorki 4K where they say it definitely works. If you want to give it a go, why not? So let's have a look on Amazon.com in America. So again, let's change it to ending soonest. So what have we got here? Vintage Zorki 4K, Leica copy, USSR, Leica copy, Leningrad 7, Leica. About $70 they seem to be going for. That one's got the box with it and everything. Let's have a look at that one. $39.99. 4 days left. No bids. Camera's in very good clean condition. It is untested, sold as it is. Manual. It's got the manual though. Viewfinder is clear. So one of the things they do say is you should always get one that looks a bit rough because it's been working at some point in the past. $62. Yeah. So that gives you kind of a pretty good idea of what you could expect from eBay and eBay.com. I guess they're going for a little bit more money than I thought they would, but if you want to try it out, I mean, what's sort of £40 or $70 to $80 in the long scheme of things? So we talked about where you might want to get a Zorki 4K from, and the next thing is what should you look for if you're buying one, mechanically. Unfortunately, obviously, if you're buying it over eBay and you get it shipped to you, you can't. But if you're lucky enough to be able to go and visit the camera, or it's on a stall or in a shop, and you can actually pick it up and have a look at the camera, what should you be looking for to see if you might be getting, a good one? Obviously, always ask the owner's permission before you pick it up and start playing around with it. And again, remember, if you're gonna change that shutter speed, wind the camera on before you change it, because you can damage the shutter. So funnily enough, with Zorki 4Ks, don't think that the worn ones and obviously used ones are less desirable from the mint examples. And the reason for this is that they're old cameras, so they might have stopped working, but also the quality control at the Russian factories maybe wasn't that great. So there are quite a few duffers that kind of made it out and would have broken down. Now you can have them repaired. There's no problem with that, but obviously it's going to probably cost you a lot more, and you have to ship it to probably someone in Russia. So I would say don't go for a completely mint example that looks like it's never been used unless the buyer can assure you that it still works and they've used it recently. So a good tip actually as well is that like I've been telling you about the shutter warning. So don't use it. Don't change the shutter speed unless you wind the camera on. If the owner tells you that as well, that's a really good sign, because you imagine these people are digging these out of lofts and the backs of closets, like we looked at eBay and eBay.com, and you can imagine they're playing with the cameras, changing the shutter speed, moving the dials, and they might have damaged them by doing that. So if you can see the camera and inspect it, look for any serious dents or cracks, marks, and signs of wear or fine, because remember, these cameras have been around for a long time, since the 1970s. Have a close look at the lens. Is it clear and bright? Now, old lenses can suffer from fungus, which is a little bit difficult to see. But for example, in my example here of this Jupiter 8 50mm f2, it actually does have some fungus in it. You might not be able to see this on the video, but it's almost like it looks like someone's dripped something onto it and it's dried, and there's some at the top and there's some around the edge. Does it really matter? Well, not really, because it might make the photos a little bit softer, and you might get a little bit of extra glare, maybe. But unless it's really bad, I mean, who cares? Just shoot with the camera that way. And when you think about the age of the camera, you've got to live with things like this. Don't try and scrape it off or dip it in stuff to clean it off, because you'll probably damage the lens. Just live with it, shoot with it, and it probably won't make any difference. And if anything, it adds to the character of the lens. Now, cock the shutter and gently, because remember, again, these are old cameras, just change the shutter speed to, I don't know, the fastest shutter speed you can get to, say 1,000th, and then just fire it. Cock the shutter again, and then go round to, say, a 60th. And you should be able to hear a difference there. The fact that unless you have some specialist equipment, you can't really test whether it's accurate or not. It probably isn't accurate, but at least you can know, well, the fast one sounds faster than the slower one. Now, also wind it on, and these cameras, what they do is when you go to the really slow shutter speeds, round to here, they actually are activating a clockwork mechanism, and you could hear that an option again. And again, remember, always wind the camera on before you select the next shutter speed. Look at the front of the camera again and just turn the aperture. What you should be able to see, and I don't know whether you see this on the video, is the aperture blades moving in and out nice and slowly. They don't stick at any point, so that's good. And also the focus ring, turn that. Does that have any hard spots, or does it stop turning? Again, the grease or lubricant inside this camera is could be 40 years old, so you're going to expect a few little bits where it might feel a little bit graunchy, slightly. But again, don't worry about that. You're just checking that mechanically it's fine. It really hasn't been dropped and completely damaged that way. Now, one of the tricky things to test if you haven't had a go with the viewfinder before is whether the viewfinder works or not. But the first thing to remember is there is a diopter on this camera here, and what that does, that's that lever there, and that adjusts the viewfinder for your particular eyes. So if you look for the viewfinder and everything looks blurry, don't panic. Adjust the diopter first so you can see stuff. Just put it up, then adjust it so that things look sharpish. And then just look for something with a high contrast edge, like the edge of a door or a tree or something like that, that's fairly bright, and then just move the focusing around, and you should see in the middle of the viewfinder kind of a yellow version of the main thing. It's difficult to describe, but when you actually do it, you'll see. And just move it and just get them lined up, and then you've got an idea that at least the viewfinder mechanism appears to be working. You don't know whether it's calibrated still, in other words, whether it's actually focusing properly, but it'll give you a good idea that it actually does seem to work that way. Now, what we could do as well is we can open the camera up. Let's have a look at the bottom of the camera. Like so. We just turn those lugs, and then the whole bottom drops off. Again, be very delicate. These have cloth shutters, so we don't want to be touching any of the cloths here. And then, well, we're already wound up. We can fire it, and you can see the shutter moving. Again, I wouldn't do this in the middle of a field if it was a car boot, so you don't want dirt going in. Now, if we wind the camera on and actually turn it to the bulb mode, we can actually press the shutter button. If I do it with this hand, see, it stays open. And then what we can now do is we can actually look through. If we open up the aperture especially, but you probably see that better. Can you see that there? And then we can look through the lens. And this is a good test as well, because if you have seen a little bit of fungus on that lens, does it actually make any difference? Does it still look clear from the inside? And if it does, happy days. Again, don't keep it open for too long. And when you do this, make sure you're not pointing the camera directly at the sun, because the focusing of the sun rays on that shutter can put holes in it as well. Remember, these are all cameras, so expect crumbly light seals and specks of stuff falling out of the back. If it's a Zorki 4 you're looking at, not 4K, watch out for the take-up spool falling out as well, because they're not attached. You don't want to lose that. But as long as it seems mechanically okay and it's a reasonable price, why not just go for it? Because you can't expect perfection in cameras that are this old. Because, if you're old enough, have you got anything that's 40 years old? What does it kind of look like now? And the best idea as to whether you'll get a good one or not is, again, just talking to the seller. What's the story behind the camera? When's the last time they used it? Do they know the tip about always winding the shutter on before you change the shutter speed? Did they enjoy shooting the camera? Why are they selling it? And asking these questions isn't really just to find out about that camera, but you might also find they're interesting people. You might want to get to know them, but they might have some other stuff as well that you might be interested in. So that's it. So that's kind of my little guide on what to look for in the 4K to make sure you're going to get one that probably will work. Again, it's always a bit of a gamble. So next we'll look up on how to actually use the 4K itself and put some film through it. So remember, before you change the shutter speed, wind the camera on. I might seem I'm going over this, but if you look up on Google something like Zorki 4K shutter problems, everybody says it because people you don't realise. So the first thing to do, I would say, is if and when you get your Zorki 4K, go over to butkus.org, butkus.org, and find the manual for the Zorki 4K. Download it. Send I think it's Mike Butkus some money as appreciation, because there's a lot of idiosyncrasies about this camera that you want to use. When you pick up, I don't know, Olympus Strip 35 or an SLR or something like that, often you can work out how to use it just by fiddling around with it. You don't want to be doing this with one of these Zorki 4Ks, because you're probably going to break it if you do that, because it does things in special ways. So now, your first thing you'll notice is that I've taken the camera out of its ever-ready case, and it doesn't have any lugs, which is a bit of a pain. So it means you have to use the ever-ready case, or kind of carry it around like this. Or I guess you could put something like some sort of strap that fixed to the tripod mount, but the tripod mount isn't a standard size, so you'd have to get an adapter for it that way. But let's have a look. So if we look at the sort of the front of the camera, hopefully this will look okay on the video. You can see that we've got our aperturing at the front. So as we turn that, the apertures are going in and out. We've got a focus ring just afterwards, and then we've got all our depth of field markings there. And then we've got our distances there. So remember, if we don't want to use the viewfinder, we could just go off, use zone focusing or distant focusing to do it that way. I wouldn't mess around taking the lens off just for the hell of it, unless you've got another lens, because the rangefinder mechanism can be quite delicate, and you don't want to damage it or get something in there that you would. So I would kind of leave it alone. And what you see here is the self timer switch. So if we flick that down, we could take some rather nice selfies. And then at the front we've got our main viewfinder that we look through, and that's the secondary one. That was the one that creates that yellow image that we superimpose. So as we're focusing the camera, those two images are lining up like that. We've got our little, that's our flash port for if we're using electronic flashes, or I guess bulb flashes back in the day as well. And then if we move round to the top of the camera, we can go along and we can see, first thing, we've got our diopter. Very important. It's very easy to knock this diopter. So again, you'll look for the viewfinder, everything will look blurred, but just kind of adjust it. There's our rewind knob. So when our film's complete, you pull that out and then you rewind it to take the film back. We've got our accessory shoe on the top. I'm not calling it a hot shoe because it's not. It's a cold shoe. There's no electronic contacts. So if you do use a flash on the top of this camera, you have to have a wire that would then lead to the little port there. We've got a shutter speed selector, which you don't touch unless you've wound the camera on. And what you do is you pull that bit up and you can turn it. And maybe you might be able to see the different settings on there. And if I fire it, you'll see it kind of move. Dunk, maybe. You saw it move that way. Let's wind it up. And also on this kind of bit here, we've also got our flash type setting. So we've got M for bulbs, is it, I think? And X is for X-Sync, which is for electronic flashes. And as we move over, that's our shutter button. So when we press that, the camera fires. And then the knurled bit around it is actually our release for rewinding the film. So when you get to the end of the film, what you have to do is you turn that clockwise, and then you can rewind the film. Let me turn it back the other way so it's okay. And you could use a threaded shutter release cable on that bit as well. And as we come over to here, what we've got is our shutter counter if you want to use it. And what happens is, when you first load the film, you can turn it so it lines up with, there's a little mark just there. Then every time you advance, this thing advance. I don't tend to use it because it's very easily knocked. It's a bit loose on my model, so maybe that's why. But I tend to, when you get near the end of the film, but you've just got to be careful because they're very strong, the winders, and you can rip the film when you do it. But you kind of get to the end, you go, oh, yeah, it's finished, and then you know to rewind it and do it that way as well. Let's have a quick look on the bottom. Again, we've got our tripod mount, not a standard size, and then we've got our lugs to open it. So let's open it up. So to open up, you just flick that one to there, flick that one to there, turn that. And what we'll do now is we will take the back off the camera. And you see the whole kind of bottom comes away there. And next up, we're going to load some film. Right, so let's load some film into the Zorki 4K. I have here handy my test roll of Ilford FB5 125 black and white film. So let's pop it in. So all we do is we just slide that bit up into there. Pull this over here. Now I don't know why, but I always find it easier just to sort of turn this upside down when I'm doing it on videos, but you don't have to. And then if we wind the film on, you'll see the direction that this goes into. Ooh. Actually, I need to engage that. Right, so this little bit here, the take-up spool, we've got to push our leader into. Now this can be a bit fiddly to start off with, and I must admit, I'm not even though I do these videos, sometimes I'm not really an expert on how you're really meant to do it. What I tend to do is just kind of shove it in, and then wind it on, and then you see how it's caught, and just keep firing it. And I know, that's loaded now. It's wandering around. It's engaged in those little lugs. There we go. So we've got a film in there, and then what I'm going to do now is take the back, put it back on nice and gently, hopefully without catching anything. do the lugs up. And the camera is almost ready. Now this is where I would then adjust the... I would wind it on a few times. Here's my little tip for you actually as well. If you want to know whether your film's been loaded correctly, just look at this bit here. And what you're looking for is when you wind this lever, that to turn. Now you'll see this easier in real life than you will see it on the video because it's a bit shiny, the Zorki. But if I turn it, yeah, you probably can't see on the video, but that is actually turning, so I know it's loaded correctly. And then all I do now is I just turn my little shutter counter to 0. Where are we? Around that way. So that's now lined up with 0. So whenever I take a shot, this advances by 1, which is great. But again, I don't really take much notice of the shutter counter because from my one it's quite loose and he's tightened up, so it tends to get knocked. And that will kind of throw me up. I rely on, when I get near the end of the film, you can kind of feel when that goes slightly tight. Don't force it because you'll rip the film. And that's when I pull it out. So when you do get to the end of your film and you feel that, oh, it goes a bit tight, all you've got to do is you take the this knurled bit and you turn that counterclockwise, like so, and then pull this out here, and then you can gently turn that and it's rolling itself back in. And when it goes slack, you'll know that you've got the header almost out. There we go, that's just gone slack. So I know it'll be ready. Now just remember to turn that back the other way so it's ready to fire. Push that back in that way. And we can pop the bottom off. And the proof will be in the fact that you should just be able to see the header of my film. There it is. So we're ready to go. I leave the headers out because if you develop your own film, you need that to pull it out in the dark bag. But obviously if it's going to a lab, then it doesn't matter if it's gone in all the way. So that's how you load some film into the Zorki 4K. Let's actually look at how you take some pictures next. So now we've got the film in the camera, and we know how to rewind the film and change it. You know, how do you actually use this this mechanical clockwork beast that is the Zorki 4K rangefinder? Well, it's a lot easier than you would think. Even though we've got no batteries, we've got no little computers, we've got no electronics to help us out. So the first thing you do, repeat after me, you'll know it already, wind the camera on before we do anything, because then it's ready. It's ready for the next step. So you're out and about, and people use viewfinders in different ways. This is just the particular way that I use it, but you might find the order you do things, apart from the fact that you wind it on, you know, might be a little bit different. But I'll be out and about, say on a photo walk, wandering around somewhere, and first thing I tend to do is just think about the exposure. Now you notice, wait a minute, Rob, how are you going to work out the exposure? How are you going to work out what shutter speed, what aperture you need to do? Well, what you can do is, if it's a sunny day, or you know, bright light, or well, any light really outside, you can use something called the Sunny 16 rule. And the Sunny 16 rule is a real simple way of helping you work out the correct exposure without having to rely on anything else. No light meters, no apps, no other cameras. And all you do is that if you're outside and there's sunshine shining on your object, so it's a normal sort of sunny day, blue sky sunny day, to work out the what settings you need, all you do is you set your aperture, say on the Zorki 4K, to 16, hence the Sunny 16 rule, and you set your shutter speed to 1 over the closest you can get to the ISO of your film. So say I've got some FP4 125, so I would put as close as I can get to 1/125th of a second. The camera's wound on, so all I do is I pull this bit up on the Zorki 4K and set it to 1/125th. My exposure is set. How simple is that? So now all I've got to do is focus it. So I'm wandering along, I see it, there's an interesting subject over there, I take the camera to my eye, holding onto it, and then I just look through, diopter's been adjusted, and then I can just line up that double image. Again, look for the edges. You always look for the edges of something because that's where the high contrast, that's what you'll see. Line them up and then take the shot, wind on, do that. Now, remember, with this sort of camera, because you're not looking through the lens, it's really easy if you can get your fingers in the way and you can't see because you're looking through this bit here and not bit there. So be careful to keep your fingers to one side, and then you've got your shot. Now let's say it becomes a little bit overcast. A cloud goes over the sun. No worries. We know that in order to let more light in, we just have to make our aperture bigger. You know, the hole that's on the front of the camera? You know, that hole we adjust there. So we just, let's say it gets a little bit cloudy. So we could go to f11. So it gets a little bit darker, we could go to f8. And then we keep on shooting that way. And then it gets sunny again. Just go back to f16. And just remember, if you do change your film and you put something like, I don't know, I've got some Kodak 200, say, colour film, and you pop that in, you would then change your shutter speed to 1/200th and set it to f16. So that's really easy, isn't it? So think about your exposure, set it. Don't worry if you haven't got a light meter. Get that all set up. Wind the camera on before you change that shutter speed. Adjust it. Line it up. And we're good to go. How easy is that? With no batteries to worry about going flat. All we've got to really worry about is our lens, is our film running out, and then we can just put some more in that way. So next, let's look at using the Zorki 4K with a light meter. So this little beast, I've been watching Good Mythical Morning a lot with Rhett and Link, so I guess Mythical Beast is coming to mind. But here we go. So this is a light meter. This is an old Leningrad Russian light meter. Quite a good pairing for the Zorki 4K. And it's just a very simple piece of electronics that allows you to work out an exposure and then put those settings into your camera. Now, you don't have to use an old light meter like this. You can buy new ones. Sekonic do loads. You can even download apps for your phone that do exactly the same job. You can even use, if you've got a digital camera, you can use that as your meter as well. All you need to do is just go to manual mode and then put the settings in that you think it might be. Look through the camera, look for the thing to move, get everything right so it's all lined up, and then you could use that. Or actually, you could do the same aperture priority mode, couldn't you? But anyway, we're using a light meter. Now, also remember that these old light meters might not be that accurate anymore, so check what it reads against the digital camera or an app on your phone to make sure it's not, you're not going to have totally underexposed or overexposed photos. So with this particular light meter, it's dead easy to use. All you do is you set your ISO of your film here. So I'm working at ISO 125 film, aren't I? So I'll set that there. And then to use it, all you do, see this lever here, you point it towards your light source and it will have a reading. If it doesn't have a reading because it's not sensitive enough, you pull that back there. And what you've got on the top here is you've got numbers. And they're giving you an exposure number. So that's giving me, the needle's gone to an exposure number of 3. So all I do then is I just set number 3 against that pointer there, and then I can look at the top and that tells me what combinations I can do. So in this lighting here where I'm inside, obviously, although it might look bright on the video, it's not very bright. You'd have to use flash normally, and that's why these shutter speeds are so long. So if I was shooting at f5.6, I would have to shoot for 1/8 of a second. So that's not really hand-holdable, isn't it? So let's have a look. So we know that the Zorki 4K has a maximum aperture of 2, doesn't it? So, but if I went to f2, sorry, I could shoot at round about 1/60th of a second. So let's wind the camera on. If we look on a shutter, we've got a 60th. So pull it out, turn it to a 60th, and then we're ready to shoot. And now I can line up, looking for those edges, fire, wind on, take the next shot that way. So as you can see, dead easy. Light meters interested. I mean, if you really want to go advanced, you can do things like but this is what we would call reflective light metering, but you might want to do incident light metering. But do you really need to be that accurate? I don't know. And I think, to be honest, that the apps for phones are pretty good, aren't they? They get you most of the way there as well. Now, another thing you might want to think about is if you're a little bit worried about focusing using the rangefinder, or maybe your rangefinder isn't very accurate. Let's say you take a load of photos and they're all slightly out of focus. You think, ugh. Don't worry, because remember, because this is a manual focus lens, and if you look at the lens, you can see we've got all our distance markings. You can use something called zone focusing, like you would on a Trip 35 when there's no rangefinder in it at all. And all that means is, if you see these markings where it's got 1 meter, 1.2, if your subject is those distances away, it's going to be in focus. So if you know you're taking some picture of a mountain a long way away, well, you just set it to infinity. If it's a building that's half a mile away, set it to infinity. But this is where it gets really, really clever. If, say, you're shooting outside and you set the aperture to f8, all right, and then, well, if you look on the distance scales here, again, I don't know how well you'll see this, but if we line up infinity with f8, so we've got infinity focus there is lined up with f8. If we just shot like that and adjusted the shutter speed for exposure, as exposure changed, as lighting conditions changed, as we were outside, everything would be in focus from about just over 4 meters away to infinity. So what's that? Just over 12 feet away to infinity, you'd have everything in focus. So if you think about when you're out and about taking photographs on the street, well, how many times do you take, unless you're doing portraits, how many times do you take photos of things that are more than 12 feet closer to you? Not very often, is it? But you might take buildings and things like that. So with that setting in the camera, so I'm at f8 and I'm focused actually at about 9 meters away, everything from infinity to 12 feet away will be in focus in my pictures. So I don't even have to think about focusing. All I use my viewfinder for is composition. So I can just wind on, shoot, because I just know. And this is the way that lots of street photographers work, because you can really capture the moment then, because you don't have to worry about it being everything being in focus. And because it's you're looking through a viewfinder where everything is in focus anyway, you don't have to worry about, like with an SLR, where if you're out of focus, you physically can't see, can you? Because everything's blurry. But with this, everything is still sharp. And, and the classic thing is you can shoot like this as well. So you can have the camera there, and you can still see everything with my left eye. See things developing as I'm waiting for, I'm waiting for the decisive moment to develop. And I can see it. Oh, right, okay, there's the background. Lovely. There's somebody wandering across. There's some here. How many people know this one? So there's some steps in front of me leading away, some stone steps, and there's a bicycle. Oh, there's a bicycle coming past. Dunk. I've got it. I've captured that particular moment. So that is incredibly useful. So how good is that? You've got a camera where you don't have to worry about the about focusing. I mean, this is true. You can apply this method to SLR cameras as well, but it's especially useful on these small little rangefinders. So hopefully you've seen how easy it is to use the Zorki 4K rangefinder. You don't even have to use it as a rangefinder. And I don't know, you might be thinking, well, what film should I put in? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that next. The film that you kind of saw in the little instruction on how to load it is Ilford FP4125. So that's traditional black and white film, but let's put that to one side for a second. And let's talk about Ilford XP2 Super, or Super XP2 400 black and white film. This is the film that you might want to start off with. Because one of the reasons why we get cameras like the rangefinder, or the reason why I get cameras like the Zorki 4K, the reason why they appeal to me is one of my great photography heroes, yes, and inspiration. I get inspiration from is like Henri Cartier-Bresson, the famous French photographer, and he used Leicas. And so, maybe I feel a little bit like him as I'm wandering around taking photos with that. And of course, his photos were all in black and white. But you might not want to develop your own black and white film, because you've got to have the space, you've got to buy the chemicals and all this sort of business. However, with a film like XP2 Super 400 black and white, it actually is a colour film masquerading as black and white. So you can shoot this in your camera, get lovely black and white images, take this along to your local film developing lab, I don't know, Asda, Walmart in America, or wherever, give them this, and they'll spot that it's got C41 developing on it, C41 chemistry. So they put this in with all the colour stuff, and lo and behold, what comes out? Lovely black and white film. Which obviously you can get print, you can get it scanned to CD, all that sort of stuff. So you can get black and white without going to all the expense and hassle of developing your own films. So give it a go. Definitely worth checking out. Don't forget just ordinary colour film as well. I mean, this is Kodak Colour Plus. It's probably a little bit expired. 1013, but colour photography, I don't know. Colour photography, I think, is the hardest form of photography to really master. Good photography is often about making things simpler, and so if you just shoot in black and white, automatically your photos become a little bit more interesting. But if you can master colour photography where your photos are still interesting even though they're in colour, I think that adds a whole new dimension, and it really puts photos of an age, I think, when you shoot in colour. Whereas black and white photos can seem a little bit old and a little bit timeless. So colour is very exciting. So you'll make sure you put some colour through. Now, although this is an expired film, don't put really, especially when you start off, don't put really expired film through your camera, because you're getting to learn how to use it, and you don't want any mistakes to happen to be a fault of the film, like underexposing or overexposing, because you need to get to know your camera. You need to get to know the shutter speeds. You know, if you put in the correct settings, it seems to underexpose everything, maybe because the shutter is a little bit slow. You can then compensate for that. But if that is happening because you've put old film in, it'll be hard to figure out what to do all the time. So maybe, by all means, put in some slightly older film, but don't go for really old stuff. Get used to your camera first before you start experimenting with that. And then if you want to get really old school, go with some traditional chemistry, black and white, like Ilford FP4 125. Maybe a little bit slow for the UK, unless it's very, very sunny outside, but it produces really nice creamy black and whites with quite small grain, easy to develop as well. And there we go. So I would say, if you're new to film photography, get some Ilford XP2400, because again, it's colour film masquerading in black and white, so you can get it developed down the road. Don't forget colour, and when you want to, dive into traditional black and white, but isn't by no means something that you've got to do. Okay, look at this. We've now got a flash on top of my Zorki 4K rangefinder. How cool is that? If you want to work in dimmer conditions inside at parties and stuff like that, even though it's an f2 lens, you might want to have a go with the flash. I'm not an expert on flash photography with film cameras. I tend to get my digital camera out if I'm in that sort of situation, but you might want to have a go. And the flash I've got on top of this is a little Helios 32. I think it's a really small one, so it's probably designed for something more like a Trip 35, but I like it because it's easy, it works, and it's got a built-in sync lead that kind of attaches to the side, so you don't have to lose it. So you probably noticed that I've attached the lead to the sync port just there on the Zorki 4K, and I've kind of wrapped it around because we're going to look through the viewfinder. It can be very easy to get the wire in the way, so it's nice and out of the way. And then here I've made sure that the sync setting is on X. The other setting, which is M, is for bulbs. Old-fashioned flash bulbs. Look it up on the internet if you're not sure what it is, but it's X, which means it's for an electronic flash. Now the next thing, wind it on, and then we've got to set the shutter speed to a 30th. That's the sync speed that this camera uses for flash, which is really quite slow. But remember, when we're doing this sort of thing, we do that because the flash is the thing that's going to be freezing the frame, not our shutter speed. Now, once we've done that, you think, well, okay, so that's my shutter speed. How do I work out my aperture? Well, it'll be on the back of your flash somewhere. On this one, it's on the side, and there's like a slide rule. And all you do is you put in your the ISO or ASA of your film. So this one says ASA times 10. So if I'm using ISO 125 film, I just put it just after 10 there. Ooh, it's a bit sticky. That's just there like that. And then you read off this dial here. So what it's telling me is I've got distances in feet and meters, and then the corresponding aperture I should be using. So with this particular flash on ISO 125 film, if my subject is 10 feet away, I need to be shooting at f6.3 to get a correct exposure. So then I could set my aperture to, f5.6. f6.3 is probably somewhere like that. We're wound on, we're ready to fire. Let's see if the flash goes off. Bingo. Now that shutter speed sounded a little bit long, didn't it there? That was more like a second rather than a 30th. So let's wait for that to charge up. Turn that one round. And then we're ready to go again. Let's see if it's charged up again. There we go. So, as you can see, very easy. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. That shutter speed sounded a little bit long. And that's true. I think I might have set it to 1 second rather than a 30th. But with flash photography, it doesn't really matter because it's the flash that freezes the action, because the flash, fires for a 10,000th of a second or something like that. And even if your shutter is open for a little bit longer, that leads to something really cool where you can get, it's called dragging the shutter, where you'll get subjects that are exposed, but then you get a little bit of blur afterwards as they move. And that is a really, really cool look. So if you fancy having to go with flash photography, your flash has got to have a cable on it. Just remember that. You've got to set your setting on your the flash thing to X. Your shutter speed is a 30th, and then look at your guide numbers on the back of your flash for the. Let's flick that over. On the back of your flash, telling you what you should set your aperture to, depending on the distance of your subject. And obviously, the distance of your subject changes, you change your aperture accordingly. So, what other lenses might you want to think about for your Zorki 4K? And the kind of caveat for that is all I've got for mine is the 50mm f2 Jupiter, and I definitely won't be buying any other lenses. If I want to go super wide or wider, and if I want to go telephoto, I'll probably dig out my SLR or my DSLR and do it that way. Mainly because I like shooting light. The reason for having a 35mm camera like this is it's fairly small. You can put it in your pocket, you can put it in your bag, and it's not about, for me, lugging around loads of kit. I think when you start thinking about telephoto lenses and ultra wides, one of the problems with the Zorki 4K and the Zorki 4s as well is the fact that the viewfinder is only set up for a 50mm lens. And so if you want to use a, say, 35 or 135, you've got to have like this turret finder on the top, which kind of looks a little bit funky. But the problem with it is something else. Again, you'd have to you'd have to put your 135mm lens on. You'd have to put your finder on, and it kind of makes everything a little bit. I don't know. It's not for me, kind of thing. I think the 50mm is nice, but again, the other lenses maybe to look out for are M39 lenses. So they do a 35mm Jupiter f2.8, so nice little bit wider. I do like wide actually, or they do a Jupiter 135mm as well. Or as I say, I think these are M39 threads, which is it LT? No, I'm not going to say. Look it up on Google. Because I'm not an expert. I don't want to give you the wrong sort of advice. But for me, I think the 50mm Jupiter 8, is a really nice sharp lens. It has a really nice look, and I'll be sticking with that because again, taking lenses on and off, you can damage the rangefinder mechanism as well, and I don't want to do that, and I'm happy with this lens as it is. So that's it. Hopefully I've given you some good ideas of why you should try out a Zorki 4K, maybe where you can buy them, what to look for when you buy them, how to use the 4K, how to use it with a light meter, and all that sort of stuff. So what's next, what should you be looking for? Well, the main thing is plenty of practice. Get to know the camera. Get to know how to get the best stuff out of it. You'll find one of the trickiest things is framing. Getting into your photo what you want to, because the viewfinder can be a little bit of an approximation of what's in front of you, and it may be a little bit sacrilege, but you probably have to do some cropping in post. I do. Okay, don't hate me for that as well with this camera. Other things you might want to try. You might want to try some cross processing. Put some slide film through it, and then take it to the lab. And if they will, get them to put it through with the colour stuff, or you might have to send it off to more of a specialist again. So you don't develop it as slide film, you develop it as C41, and you get all these really funky colours. Great thing to do on nice sunny days, not perhaps when it's overcast. You could try red scale film as well, where you take the film out and you reverse it, you roll it back in the dark, obviously, and then you basically overexpose by, I think it's 3 stops, and you can get some really interesting photos. That, again, look that up on the Google red scale, and you'll see that. But the main thing really is with this sort of camera, it's a great tool because it's fairly small and not on that shutter speed, it isn't, but on a faster shutter speed, it's fairly quiet, I guess. It's not silent by any means, but it's a good tool for taking fairly unobtrusive photos. Remember, it doesn't look like a big black horrible DSLR camera that people are going, why is he taking pictures? This is definitely like, someone sees you taking pictures with this baby, if they're into photography, they might be quite interested. Oh, what's that? Is that like it? Oh, it's a Zorki, and they might go and have a... But they don't think, when you've got a big black DSLR with this big lens coming off, people have a different view, I think. They might think you're you're a tourist or something when you're using one of these. So I think the Zorki 4K will get you into situations and enable you to capture photos that you probably wouldn't have been able to get with your big, brash, black DSLR with its big lens on. So there we go. That's enough from me. If you've got any questions, you can always email me, scalespeed@gmail.com, or put them in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed the video and found it useful, please like it. I'd really enjoy it if you subscribed as well. And I'll see you again soon.